It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy. Back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I take my first pass at the commander in front of us on a budget on my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, so I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider doing all that YouTube stuff. I'd appreciate it. But today, we're celebrating the Sonic Gang coming to Magic. The Secret Lair is out either today or last week, this week or last week. So I thought I'd cover all the commanders from it, talk about it, kind of like how I did with the Marvel set of Secret Lair commanders. I know that these are going to be potentially hard to find, so my hope is that if you want them, you can find them and have some fun. But today we're going to start off with Amy Rose, a 4-mana Boros commander. 3/3 Hedgehog Warrior with haste. It says whenever Amy Rose attacks, we're going to attach up to 1 target equipment to her. Then, up to 1 target attacking creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is Amy Rose's power. I think more often than not, when something says equipment on it, pretty much means that's what we're going to care about. And that's what we want to do here. There's some really great equipment. I think the big thing to remember about Amy is that she's going to be a great attacker on her own, but we really have the ability with her ability to make other attackers really great. So we have these arbitrarily large equipment that give large buffs to power, which are going to be good for Amy because, again, she can then buff up another creature. But we also want to make sure we're hitting hard. And then I think the other way that we can really take advantage of Amy's ability is that they get this buff until end of turn. So if we can find a way to take multiple combats, what we're basically going to do is just start stacking these buffs around, maybe get multiple creatures per turn, or really buff the same creatures for a turn for big damage and try to push that for the win. Little note, I've been putting the deck cost down below. Just wanted to note that there are some cards in the deck that the Secret Lair versions that just don't have their cost there yet, so I can't really, put that on there, but just know that that's one of the things. I want to say a quick thank you to the channel member. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in seeing all of our videos just a teeny bit early, check that out down below. Well, all right. There's a lot of options as equipment go, and I think the obvious ones you're going to see people talk about with Amy Rose are things like Atir and Prewin from Final Fantasy, giving her base power toughness XX, where X is our life total, is a huge deal. Then she's handing out a massive buff right to that other creature, and you can pair this with other equipment, right? You've something like Blackblade or Forge that just gives +1/+1 for each land we control. Again, still going to be a really relevant buff mid to late game, 5/6 +7/+7, which is huge, especially when you think about the fact that it's going on Amy and it's going on another creature. Brotherhood Regalia can help protect Amy and make her not be able to be blocked, which is another really big deal. I think most of the time in equipment decks, you're kind of running towards this Voltron-esque style game plan where you're going to be trying to knock people out with commander damage, and if not, you're just going to try to deal as much damage as you can. And so having the ways to make Amy unblockable feels like a really great idea to push that advantage. Another example of a mega buff card that can be really useful for Amy is Colossus Hammer, especially since Amy gets around that 8 equip cost just to give +10/+10 and losing flying. And we don't mind losing flying because we can give her other abilities. We can give her trample with other equipment and things like that, but we can also give her lifelink through things like Caduceus, which gives her lifelink and indestructible. Dancer's Chakrams comes in and makes a hero to attach itself to, but gives the equipped creature +2/+2, has lifelink, and then gives our commander +2/+2 in lifelink. And this is a really huge deal because whether you choose to keep the Chakrams on the hero or we put it on another creature, maybe that creature is the thing, probably my thought is whatever the Chakrams is attached to is the thing that Amy's giving its buff to, so that we can basically just try to get an arbitrarily large amount of life each turn as we're dealing damage. What that's going to do is take away, honestly, one of our biggest weaknesses in the equipment deck, which is that we're probably going to be really light on the amount of creatures we have to block. So as we get this lifelink and we're gaining these life back 10, 15 point chunks back, if not more than that, it's really going to help keep us safe as we push in our advantage and try to knock down our opponents. But we have things that give trample, things like Leyline Axe and Loxodon Warhammer give trample. Now, Leyline Axe gives double strike, which is a really huge deal as well, especially when Amy starts getting bigger and bigger. But again, both of these are great pieces. Now, an equipment that sees a lot more play in decks where your commander has special abilities is Helm of the Host. This is an equipment that says at the start of combat, we make a copy of the equipped creature, except that token isn't legendary. Now, I think it would make sense for this to go on Amy and make copies of Amy's, but we'll see in a few minutes when we talk about our multiple combat situation that like sometimes it may be useful to put the Helm of the Host on the creature that can potentially give us another combat or do something do something to buff our board or things like that. Helm of the Host doesn't always have to go on Amy, but I think it's not a bad shot considering then you can start handing out multiple buffs per combat. Mauled Skyclaves gets the creature that is equipped with it flying in first strike. Again, great thing maybe to potentially be what you target Amy's ability with, getting it in the air and giving it the ability to hopefully hit for even harder. We see the Sonic version of Hammer and Nazan here is Pico Pico Hammer. It gives a creature +2/+0 and indestructible. Again, great thing for Amy trying to get around some of the removal that's going to come her way. But we do need to figure out the exile removal, so we still want things like Thran Power Suit that gives Ward 2 or things that give Hexproof, right? So there's other options there to protect her, but I think we kind of want to run the gambit on the switching up, right? The things that we have to protect her with. But there's a lot of creatures in the deck that can be targets for Amy, but are also just great for us. Akiri says whenever you attack a player with one or more equipped creatures, you draw a card. It's going to add some extra cards to our hand. But for a white mana, we can unattach an equipment from a creature we control and tap it and give it indestructible. I really like this ability because it really is going to help protect us in some senses. Like, Akiri's not going to be able to protect against a Swords of Plowshares or a Path to Exile. But Akiri will be able to protect you from a lot of board wipes and some of the less expensive or less premium removal that's just going to destroy. That's a huge deal, especially if some of our creatures don't already have indestructible. Arden says at the beginning of combat, we can attach any number of ores and equipment you control to target permanent or player. This is a massive ability, right? Because then you just load up Amy, get her huge, and with all these equipment, and then hand out that big buff. Astor lets us look at the top 7 when it comes in and get an equipment into our hand, and then gives all of our equipment equip 1, making them a lot easier to attach if we don't want to just rely on Amy's ability. We're playing the pair of the new Clouds we can. Cloud Midgar Mercenary from the main set, going and getting any equipment and putting it into our hand. And if he's equipped, if an ability of Cloud or an equipment attached to it triggers, it goes off in additional time. That's an interesting ability. We're not really paying into it too much, but it's good to note in case you start to use things that give a buff to other creatures. And then Cloud Planets Champion from the starter kit, as long as it's equipped, has double strike and indestructible, a potentially dangerous target for Amy's ability, especially if we can get a trample enabling equipment on it. That could be pretty big, and Cloud's a little bit easier to equip to. Codsworth's another easy way to give Ward 2 to our commander. We can tap it for 2 mana to cast equipments, or we can tap it to just put in a equipment on a creature we control. This is a really huge ability because especially when you start get to these equipment that costs 4, 6, 8 to equip, Codsworth can pretty easily help us get around that. Furion has a very interesting ability, allowing all of our creatures that are equipped to get haste. And whenever a non-token equipment enters, you get to make a copy of it. Except it has its equip abilities cost 2 less to use, and then it goes away at the end of the turn. So fun way to get extra copies of some pretty brutal equipment if we can find them at the right time. Gilgamesh is just another great card from Final Fantasy, and one I think is going to see a lot of playing equipment decks going forward. Whenever it enters or attacks, you look at the top 6 and just put any number of equipment from among them onto the battlefield. And then when you put one or more of them on the battlefield this way, you can attach them to a samurai. So we can attach them all to Gilgamesh if we want to. Gilgamesh, I think, is just a great body. It has that search, and it's going to be a dangerous threat because it goes off every time it attacks as well. Kellen is a really interesting card. On its adventure side, you basically have Open the Armory, allowing you to go get any equipment you want and putting it into your hand. And then on his regular side, you have a 2/2 with double strike that gets a buffs all other creatures for each other equipment attached to Kellen. So this is kind of fun because if we have Kellen and Amy out at the same time, you can basically be buffing them both, right? You can put an equipment on Kellen, and that will also buff Amy, right? And then Amy will be able to buff other creatures. It's a very interesting ability, and I think having double strike on a creature is always really useful. Again, when we can start utilizing trample. Pure Steel Paladin says whenever an equipment comes in, we draw a card, and then that classic Metalcraft ability, equipment we control have equip 0 as long as we have 3 of our artifacts. Pure Steel is one of those creatures that if we see it, we want to protect it so that we can have that awesome equip 0. We've got a pair of spells that can go get us any equipment we want, put into our hand. Open the Armory got that great new Secret Lair art, and then Steel Shaper's Gift got that Secret Lair art in Fallout. Either way, getting one of our choices is huge, especially depending on what we have access to, what is going to be really good. And I think that's one of the things where, as you play the deck, you're going to find out what you want in certain situations. Fighter class comes in, gets an equipment of our choice. Level 2 reduces the equip. And then level 3 says whenever a creature we control attacks, we can force a creature to block it if we want to. Forge Anew just says that when it comes in, we can get equipment from our graveyard back to the battlefield. As long as it's our turn, we can equip at instant speed, which is massive. Um, Maybe your opponents try to just chump block our really big creatures and you throw all your equipment onto another creature to get big damage. And then the first equip we do each turn costs 0. And then Sigarda's Aid's a really fun enchantment. So we can cast all our equipment at flash speed, and then whenever equipment comes in, we can attach it to a creature. So this is huge because, again, you get to get around that equip cost, which may not seem like a very big deal, but when you can do it at flash speed, this makes a big difference. Maybe you take the attacks and force your opponent to some bad blocks, and then you put the equipment in. There's so many ways to take advantage of this card specifically, and even better with Amy. Depending on what situations we get ourselves into. But again, I think, like I said, where Amy's going to shine is taking multiple combats. So what can we do with that? Well, we have creatures that can do it. Things like Karlach, Fury of Avernus just says whatever you attack, if it's the first combat of the turn, untap all attacking creatures. They get first strike till end of turn, and you get an additional combat. Um, Karlach isn't a very good target for Helm of the Host, but Aki Battle Squad is. Aki Battle Squad says whenever one or more modified creatures you control attack, so being equipped is modified, untap all modified creatures you control. After this combat, there's an additional combat. This ability triggers only once per turn. So Aki Battle Squad's ability can only trigger once per turn. But if I were to make a copy of Aki Battle Squad, then I would be able to get an extra combat. I'm now trying to think in my head. So I attack with Aki Battle Squad. I make the Helm of the Host copy, right? We attack. We would go to a new combat, make that. Yeah, so you should be able to take infinite combats with it, or as many combats as you want, and then you're just getting Amy Rose triggers. Genji Glove adds 1 combat per turn with its ability, and gives the equipped creature double strike. Again, a really fun ability. Hexplate Wallbreaker, same thing. Gives 1 more combat and adds +2/+2. It also comes to the body, which is kind of cool. And then we have this kind of classic Ag Assault combo. We need something that's going to generate his mana during combat. My thought here was something like the Reaver Cleaver, which has got that beautiful Knuckles reprint. Creature gets +1/+1 trample, and whenever it deals damage to a player in combat, you get to make that many treasures. And then Ag Assault costs 5 to just take another combat. So you can do this a couple ways. There's things like Sword of Feast and Famine and other things that you can do this with, but I think Reaver Cleaver is the easiest, and it has that new Sonic art, so I thought it fit really well. But again, as long as you can guarantee 5 damage with the Reaver Cleaver going through because of the trample, that means you have the 5 mana for the Ag Assault. And I mean, unless your opponent can kill your creatures in combat over multiple, blocks, this combo should lead to you just ending out the game with big enough creatures, especially since Amy's just going to continue to give out that buff. I'd almost recommend you put the cleaver on another creature rather than Amy and allow Amy's buff to keep getting you those treasures, locking you into this combination. But I've said it before on the show and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my first stab at Amy. And I think going into testing, I'd want to see if there's other equipment. Maybe I'm interested. Something like Basilisk Collar can add Death Touch and Lifelink. Maybe Lifelink's a big thing. I stared a lot at Super State. I really wanted to put it in, and I stared a long time at it because I was like, man, it does everything you want for Amy. But truthfully, I think I just ended up kind of just misreading the card on first brew. I forgot about the bottom ability. When it deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to each other opponent. And I was really just looking at the middle ability to give it the buff and all the stats. I think now reading it more, especially after doing the deck, I think I would probably immediately put it back in and take out one of our less aggressive enchantments or equipment, because I think Super State makes a lot more sense. The only downside is it's 7 mana to get in, but I think once you pay the 7 mana for it, it's just going to be brutal. And you have to remember, Arden can move this. It's not like once it's on a creature, it's completely done for. We have ways to move it, like things like Codsworth, and things like that. But I think I misjudged Super State, to be honest, a lot. And I think for that reason, I would probably look to bring it back in almost immediately. But let's do what we love to do on the channel the most and get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtests on our channel is not to find Magical Christmas Land. it's not just to show off all our best plays, but it's to get in some gameplay scenarios and kind of understand how we're going to set up our deck and what we're looking for in an opening hand. So on this one, I'm keeping a four lander with Sigarda's Aid, Leyline Axe, and Aggravated Assault. Now, Leyline Axe can start itself on the battlefield if I wanted to, but if I do that, it costs 3 to equip. Whereas if I wait, Sigarda's Aid can actually let me attach it for free. So I think this is one of the odd scenarios where I'm going to wait to play the Axe, because I think I can get a little bit more accomplished if I wait and just attach it for free. So here I'm thinking Sigarda's Aid turn 1. Turn 2, not really nothing I can do, right? Amy's 4 mana. So we're just going to kind of work our way up. Turn 3, again, I guess I could get the Ag Assault down, but if I'm going to play Amy next turn, I don't really see the need for the Ag Assault now. We've got a nice, interesting way to work ourselves up there towards that Aki Battle Squad. Now I'm thinking Amy again, she can attack, kind of thinks we don't have another creature to sit there, but that's fine. So now remember, she auto-attaches something to herself, but we also have Sigarda's Aid, which is going to automatically get things in. So I mean, Mithril Coat plus the boots the Graves doesn't seem like a bad idea. No, she doesn't get all that much of a buff, but she has Indestructible and she has Shroud. So we need to be slightly careful with the Greaves on there giving her Shroud, that we cannot target her now with an equipment until we put another creature down. So it might not be a bad idea to focus on getting another creature in. My thought is something like Aki Battle Squad, giving it the Greaves. But if I give it the Greaves, then I can't target it with Amy's ability, can I? Right, because it would have Shroud and not able to be targeted with Amy's ability. I think I'm still willing to do this. Amy can buff up the Aki. The only problem is it doesn't have haste, right? That was my reason for putting the Greaves over. I guess the question is it worth taking the second combat even that? Or is it worth going like Battle Hammer? At least I get to buff them both. And I would be able to attack. Maybe that makes more sense this turn. Again, the Shroud's brutal for Amy's ability, but at least here she's a 5/3 and Bruner's a 7/3. Hold on. The first one I caused 0 each turn, so I could do this, I guess, and then pay the 0 to move it over, and then now she can target Bruner. It feels awkward to not leave Amy with Indestructible. So I think I'd rather just do that, forego the buff this turn. And then coming into our next turn, Leyline Axe here to give her that buff. I have 2 mana left. Not much I can do with it. I think with 2 mana, I'd probably move this back over now that it doesn't need the haste anymore. And then now, take the attacks, get the buff again. The problem is now we have Shroud again, but, we can move it around if need be. And then here, my thought is get Aki down. Now we're getting 2 combats. Maybe the Bruner could become a problem. Maybe you move this over here, give it the double strike and trample so Amy can give it the buff, right? We didn't see a ton of great enchantment. I mean, we could have also pitched a card to the Windfall to try to dig for some more. Like maybe we pull the Passage and just dig for the Windfall, but we would still have the mana up to give, to use the Stronghold this turn. We could crack the Axegate Armory to go get an equipment of our choice. I forgot about that, but that could be something we do this turn. I'm trying to think, what would you go get? It's 4 mana and it. So we'd only have 2 mana left. I guess you could go get the Regalia to make Amy unblockable, or make, Bruner unblockable and just buff it up, right? So I guess that's an option. I think some of this pathing is something we could figure out through testing. I think you can start to see kind of that idea gel up. Let's go into playtest number 2 here. A little bit awkward, just a 1-lander, but we have Soaring and Talismans. We're looking at a big first turn. Infantry Shield makes extra 1/1s that get to attack and hit an opponent. Infantry Shield has a really fun interaction with Amy, in that, remember that if any triggers happen on attack, we get to put the order that they're on. Is it target? It does target. Never mind. I was gonna say you could target one of the warriors, but it is a target, so I have to declare the target when it goes on the stack. Either way, Infantry Shield hopefully is just going to make a bunch of 1/1s that can deal extra damage. We see Black Blade, Maul of Skyclaves, and Wallbreaker. So definitely some really interesting pieces to start with. Nothing I can do right there. Now this turn, unfortunately, I'm missing the second red, so like the Wallbreaker could be fun, right? Get it down this turn, but I am missing out on that. I guess I can just go for Amy, right? I guess we'll think about this. She comes in with haste and she auto attaches when she comes in, so it actually might make more sense to get the pieces down this turn, right? Since she's gonna come in and auto attach, right? And then my thought is get the Black Blade on this turn, so that's a 6/6. Here we see Sephiroth turns all of our modified creatures into 7/5s. A great thing with Amy's ability. Note that the thing that we equip has to go on to her. Again, I'm a red off of the Wallbreaker. I could go for Caduceus and gain some big life here, but I kind of like the idea of Sephiroth. Auto-equip the Infantry Shield. I'm going to have Sephiroth put a cell counter on Amy. Right? So now she's a 7/5, 8, 6, 9, 7, 10, 8. So we're making 10 warriors off of the Infantry Shield, and then we're going to give Sephiroth that big buff. Again, Sephiroth doesn't have haste, which kind of stinks, but that is what it is. The important part is that we got another thing down, and we could start, right, getting more here. Here, 5 mana, we see Codsworth. Codsworth is great. I don't even mind the idea of just going for like a Maul of Skyclaves on Sephiroth. And then when we buff Sephiroth right for 10, he's going to be huge in the air. Big 17 with first rank. Again, we're missing that one red for the Wallbreaker, which kind of stings. Like, I could go Caduceus and put Caduceus on Sephiroth. That could make sense, right? And now we have 2 huge attackers, and you've got all those warriors attacking. Sephiroth, if any of those warriors are still, well, they all went away, never mind. I was going to say Sephiroth could put the cell counter on something else, but I think if we had another red source, I would just do the Wallbreaker, have Sephiroth put the counter on the Rebel that the Wallbreaker has, and I think we'd be in good shape. But here, Sephiroth is just going to get lifelink. It's going to get, what, a plus 10 buff, and it's just going to gain us 17 life. Amy Rose is still going to be hitting hard and have all those warriors come around. You can split those warriors up however you want. And of course, we miss the land drop again, which is a little bit brutal. It could have made sense maybe to do something like Codsworth instead. But Genji Glove, I mean, all the Skyclaves almost feels like it's just makes sense to do on Amy. Get her in the air with flying. And then, I mean, hand out the buff, gain more life. I think Sephiroth is what? 7 plus 5 is 12 plus 12 from Amy. So he's at 24, just gaining us a ton of life. I guess you could argue you could go the Maul here, guarantee more damage with Sephiroth in the air, but again, you're still guaranteeing a ton of damage here, and you get more warriors that way. So, and the other thing is Amy has Menace, so Amy probably has a good shot. Well, probably was having a good shot of getting in somewhere for damage before, and is now pretty much guaranteed unless somebody's playing a deck with flyers. So Amy's going to be really punishing in for big damage. Our only miss was just not hitting that other red source for the Wallbreaker, but we also could have just gone Genji Glove this turn, put it on, Amy Rose and had a second combat. So, there's a lot of ways you could look at this turn, whether it's Maul versus Genji Glove, on which you'd rather do. Otherwise, I think we're in a good state. The issue here is that Amy wouldn't have Indestructible, but Sephiroth would because of the staff. So if somebody did wipe the board, I mean, Amy goes away. We're in trouble because we barely have enough mana to get her back. But we get her back. She auto attaches, I don't know, Black Blade to herself, and then we're still back in business, right? That next combat on attacking. But let's do one more playtest here, keeping a 3-lander with that talisman again. There's a Kiri, so again, a nice option to draw. There's Arden for the equipping, and then there's Armored Sky Hunter. So it says whenever it attacks, you're going to look at the top 6, put in aura equipment from among them on the battlefield, and then you get to attach it. So it's a really fun attacker and can be really useful for us. I think I'll just throw the Sundown Pass in since turn 1, since I really don't have much else to do. Same thing with the Talisman there. So 4 mana here. If I go for the Arcane Signet, then I only have 2 mana. I guess the question is, what am I doing next turn? If I don't top a land, I'm in the exact same scenario. If I throw Arcane Signet down, I can get Firion down, I guess. Like Firion or Arden or Akiri. Maybe the option something like Akiri, just to maybe get some more. There's Cloud. Okay, so 5 mana. Cloud can go get me any equipment I want, which is really interesting. If I go Amy, there's nothing to attach to. If I get the Wall Breaker in, I might be able to set up something next turn, is my thought. Can't attack this turn because it doesn't have haste, but I think that's okay. Now, turn 6. I want to attack with the Wall Breaker. Cloud can go get anything to my hand. What am I looking for? Well, a big buff for Amy would be great. Something like Colossus Hammer, something like Excalibur. So maybe the answer is like Cloud plus Amy, and then we just go search for an equipment. Like I said, my thought is something like, again, something like the Colossus Hammer to put on Amy to not only make her big, but to give out the buff. Caduceus could be fun, but I kind of think it's the hammer, which I don't have enough to get down this turn because I only had enough to get Amy down. I can move the Wall Breaker if I want to, which doesn't seem like a terrible idea since Amy's can be attacking right this turn. That just makes her a little bit bigger. We can give the +5 buff back to the Rebel just to have it attack too. We're gonna draw a card with Akiri because we have an equipped creature that's attacking. Then the next combat, I mean, I'd probably do the same thing. Give the buff to the Rebel, right, and attack again. So that Rebel was a 5/2, and then it was a 5/2 or 7/2, and then it was a 12/2. So, I mean, hopefully no one blocks and kills it, but I mean, we may have to get it in somewhere to get the damage in. But now as we come back to our next turn, we've got the boots. I really want to get the hammer down because remember the hammer we can equip for free. Wallbreaker only gives 1 extra combat, otherwise it would be really huge on somebody like Cloud because then it could go off twice. Let's say Arden could free equip. Do we go with something like Firion? If I do Firion, Colossus Hammer is... Okay, so if I go Firion, Colossus Hammer, and then Arden, I'm getting a copy of Colossus Hammer for this turn because of Firion, right? I put the real one on Amy. Arden puts the fake one... I guess it doesn't matter whether it's Cloud or Akiri. I guess I could also arguably put 2 Colossus Hammers on Amy if I want to, but it really doesn't make sense. I'd rather draw more cards, right? And then on attack with Akiri, I'm going to draw 2 cards because they're probably going to be attacking different people. The buff, I guess I could just hand to something like Cloud, give Cloud a +15 buff. I guess I could also like put the hammer there and put it on Akiri. Either way, the point is put it on one of them, make him a huge attacker, put it on the other one, and then just take some big attacks. We lose the Colossus copy, which kind of stinks, but I think we still gained a ton of benefit. I'm sorry, and then you had the extra combat, and at the start of the extra combat, you could move it if you needed to. So if somebody like blocked Cloud and killed it or whatever, like you could always move it around. And again, you get another Amy buffs, you're giving it to the other one of these two, and probably just taking some big damage. Like I think that's a, and I probably fumbled my way through it a little bit, but I think that just kind of just show you like how some of these pieces can really interact well with Amy. And then I didn't even really go through all of her buffs. Her buffs were probably what dealt most of the damage there. And if we had gotten something like Armored Skyhunter down or something like Freya, which has flying on our turn, would have been even better, right? Because then you're get more guaranteed damage through. But let me know, what do you think of Amy down in the comment section below? I think this is a really interesting deck. The equipment space is just a very interesting space. I think a lot you'll see a lot of people throw Amy into the modified decks that are going around, whether it be the new cloud decks. Like I'm sure people want it for that deck. The Sonic deck's kind of interesting. We're going to talk about that later in the week. But I think Amy's a really fun idea for an equipment commander, and I think it's going to see a lot of play for that. The Boros space is very interesting, and we just probably saw a lot of those cloud Boros get built. But Amy's going to be a fun one. I think it's going to see a lot of play because it, to be honest, is a really good commander, and I think there's a lot more you can do with it. So I'd love to know what you think of Amy down in the comment section below, and I will catch you on the next.